Hi, I've been asked lots of times where to start when setting up a community garden. So I thought I would do a few videos to take you through the process step by step in the way I did it. I think there'll be lots of ways to go around this, and it will be dependent on your resources and the space that you've chosen, or whether you haven't yet found a space to create a community garden. So first of all, I'm going to start with your foundational work that you really want to do. And so the first step for you is to decide what you want to achieve with your garden. So do you want to set up a community garden where people have the opportunity to grow edible food, edible plants? Do you want to have a community garden where people are able to just experience the outdoor space and wildlife? Do you want a mix of both? Do you want to create a sensory space for health and well-being? Or do you want to combine all of the above? So that's the very first question you want to ask yourself, really, is what direction do you want to go in with your community garden, because that will dictate all of the following steps that you need to take. So in my case, I wanted to do all of the above with a heavy focus on wildlife and ecology, and a much less of a focus on food growing. It actually turned out that wasn't, I realised as I went along, that was not my priority. So we went further down the wildlife road and the health well-being road. And that was because I looked around, and most community gardens do growing of vegetables and stuff, and I felt like there was a place for something a little bit different. And for me, I wanted the chance for people to come along and just experience how powerfully good for you being outdoors is, and focusing almost on the stillness and the quiet of a community space that's set up for nature, wildlife and so on. So I knew which direction I was really drawn. It also links into the work I do from day to day, and that is gardening sustainably and organically in private gardens, often and again with a heavy focus on attracting wildlife, pollinators and so on. So that was my baseline, my foundation. So that's something you want to have a really good think about. It's worth thinking about where your skills lie. And there's no denying at all that you do need some skills in this field, because when you get to the point of approaching the person who owns the land, I mean, if you own your own land, then you're away, really. But most people will have to approach someone that owns the land. In a lot of cases, it will be the local council and authorities. You will need to prove to them, on paper at least, that you have a track record in the field you're talking about, field as in area, and you'll need to convince them that you have a number of skills, actually, but don't make the mistake of the only skill that you need to tell them about is gardening skills, because actually that's fairly low down on the list of priorities. It's definitely needed in the day-to-day running, but essentially you're starting a project that is like a business. It has all the elements of any business, so you need to be really really good with people, negotiating, communicating. You need to be reliable. There's a lot of things you need to be able to do. You need to be able to budget well. You need to be able to put your head down and do the hard graft and foundational work. You need to be good at multitasking, and so on and so on. I'll get to all that later. So going back to that foundational step of thinking about what it is you want to achieve with the space is your fundamental starting point. And so other things you want to think about as fundamentals are, do you want to keep it low key, or do you want to really go for it? If you're keeping it low key, then you might want to consider a friends of group. So it might be friends of Green Acres community space, for example. Or you might want to go down the road, which is a little bit more complicated but easier to fundraise in lots of ways, of opening a not-for-profit company like I did, which will allow you fundraising for grants and so on. So you also want to say to yourself, do you need grants? It may, I think a lot of people think they need to do that, but actually, do you even need to fundraise for grants? It may be that the space you've chosen just needs people to come in and mellowly potter around, but it might be the space you've chosen is looks like a building site and does need some money ploughing into it. So that's your second consideration, is, are you going to run it on a very low key basis, or are you going to establish a not-for-profit company in order to give yourself the opportunity to fundraise with grant giving organisations? So I'm going to leave you with those 2 points. Number 1 is your overall mission with what you want to do, and number 2 is how you want to set up in terms of an organisation or not, or a friends of group, really low key. So if you establish those 2 things first, then I will come back and do another video to follow on from this one. We'll touch on different things that you might come across during the process as well, because lots of things could crop up, again based on where you are and what sort of green space you're looking at. So that's enough from me today, and that's number 1 in my little series about setting up a community garden, and I'll see you in the next one.